Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll start this Avodah Zarah daf lamed tes. We are going to begin on the bottom of lamed ches lamed beis, 3 lines on the bottom. V'kovshin shedarken lasis b'soichen yayin. So this goes back to our Mishnah on lamed hey lamed beis that says these are certain things in which an oidei kachavim are aser. However, there's no iser hana. So we were listing numerous examples, and we're up to when it comes to these items in which they have the custom to put wine or vinegar into it. And therefore, because of this, there is this, of course, concern of it being an issue. And Rashi says, kvashim on the Mishnah is lichvash dagim, the yerek, to pickle fish or vegetables, or perhaps certain parts of an animal into vinegar. So on this, the Gemara says as follows: the only time that there's only asr, but it's not asr b'hana, is it's just their custom to sometimes add wine, but it's not for sure. Avol b'yadua, if it's a davar yadua, asr afil b'hana, because it's an issue of yain nesach, and therefore it's asr b'hana. Ma'ishna memorious. So how is it different than we learned before regarding fish brine? It says Rashi derubad alma shadu bechamra v'havi biyadua. So the reality is that the majority of people, they do put wine into their fish brine, and therefore it should be like the din of yadua. Dishar rabban b'hana, but nonetheless it's still mutter over there, even though it's like yadua. The answer is because hasam lavri zuhama. When they put the wine in there for the fish, it's, as Rashi says, it's kamad ozul ibud. It's like it's completely being destroyed. It's worthless because the purpose is not for the wine. It's just to remove the very potent odor of the fish. B'hachlam tuki taim. Over here, the wine actually enhances the taste. That's why we're more strict. No, even if it's yadua, it's yain nesach, it's still mutar. Ma'ishna memorious. So why is it different than morius? Rameir de Asr Bahana, that Rameir actually over there says Morius is Asr Bahana. Well, why over there would be Asr Bahana, but not here? So it says Hasam over there Yadia Mamashai, Hachal Yadia Mamashan. Says Rashi, over there we know its substance. Says Rashi, Shahari Matbilin Bai, that people dip into it, but Raitev Nechel Vayai Nechel Imai. But over here, you're eating the vegetable, not the liquid. It's only there to preserve it, and therefore it's different. So again, it's added merely to preserve the vegetables, so maybe it's different. Okay, and then we continue with other examples of our Mishnah. Again, going back to Lamed Hayamid Beis. Other examples, for example, tris trufa. If you have this type of small salted fish which is chopped up, v'tzir shein b'dag kalbus, or if you have some type of a brine that doesn't have daga kalbus. Rashi says the derech kalbus ligado mi'aleha batzir shel dagim tahirim, b'tzir shel dagim tahirim. It usually grows together with kosher fish. Okay. So therefore, the question is, it could have commingled. And then sheitetes by vachilik. Rashi says chilik has been dugim katanim tahirin ve'ein lo sanaper v'kaskases. They don't have fins and scales yet. Va'adol legadol lachar zman sanaper v'kaskases. They eventually will. The kaimelon demuteris. Those fish are actually mutter, okay, but again, the problem is they may look not kosher, okay. The karet shall chiltis, in this type of grain, etc. Okay. Umelech, let's just finish this Mishnah. Umelech shall kunduris, this special type of item, which we're going to explain. Okay. So that's basically the rest of the Mishnah. So now we know that, let's see the Gemara. So v'tris trufa v'sir she'in ba'dag b'chul. So it's really going in the next piece. So my chiluk. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Abu Marab Zu Sultanis Mnei Masur Mnei She'arvona Oila Ima, because it's mixed in together with non-kosher fish. Okay. Tan Rabbanan Ein Lo Yachshav Yasil Gadel Lo Yachar Zman. What happens if you have something, as far as simanim are concerned, we just saw this already in the Rashi, in the Mishnah, that right now it doesn't have simanim, doesn't have the fins and scales, but in the future it will grow them. Kegoin, for example, hasultanis, the offits, harizem mutter. So as we said, mi'ikar adin, these things are totally mutter, because even though they don't have fins and scales now, but it's a min dug tahar, because it will. Yeshua shavi asid al hashir. What happens if they have fins and scales now, but they're going to end up losing them? So b'shah she'oyel min hayam, from the time that you take them from the sea, kegoin akunus va'afunus kitas patius viach saftis vi'atunis mutter. So I'm not much of a fisherman. However, these are all, again, examples where the opposite happens. They have fins and scales and they lose them, so it's still fine. So Achras Rabbi Avodah B'Kisvi, so he made an announcement that Kirbi Dagim V'Orvan, the fats of fish and its eggs, Nichin Mikol Adam. You can purchase them from anyone. Why? Cheskasan Ein Boyin Ela Miplanus Mipalusa V'Aspamaya. That it only comes from these particular things in which they are kosher. Ki hadiyam Rabbiya Hai Sach Nata Debav Nahara Sharia. So again, this type of fish, which is taken from the name of this particular river, is mutter. My time mimisham dar difi maya. Is it because the water is very powerful and swift? The high dug tame kivan deleisle chut shedra. When it comes to a dug tame, if it doesn't have a chut shedra, then beduchta de difi mai, in a place where the water goes fast, lo matzikoi. So maybe that's the proof that they're kosher, and this is actually more in Sukkah too, that if it's because of it's in waters which are very rapid and very strong, in which non-kosher fish can't survive, so the fact that it survives shows as a tahar. El mishum de malichi maya. Says no, it's because it's salted. B'hai dag tame kivan, because it's salt water. B'hai dag tame kivan de leis le kalfe. Since it doesn't have the scales, but duchta the malichi mayim, where it's salty, mamatzi koi, v'akachazenda koi. So he said, well, what do you mean? We do see. So the kash is that. What do you mean? We do see that they live there. So the kash is, well, you're trying to prove this is a proof. No, but non-kosher fish also live there, and also in a place where the water goes very fast. We say that non-kosher fish live there too. Elam yishum d'la marbatina dog tame. Because they don't reproduce. Amravino inna deka shavchi be nahar guza v'nahar ganda asiri. Now that the water flows from these other locations, then it becomes usher, because it's possible that a dug tame has entered from those other locations. Rabbi, Haichamra diyama shari, tura diyama usher. So he says, looking Rashi, Chamra diyama v'tura diyama, kaimon mesech t'schuin, kol sheyesh b'yam yesh b'yabasha. Everything that's in the water is on the land. Chutz min a chulda. A chulda is the only exception, and therefore, when it comes to the Chamra diyama, is mutter, but tura diyama is aser. Okay. V'tzimonech tame tahar tame. Ravashi, shvar ninva shari. So he says that this is also allowed, and it's kosher. Kaddish ninva aser. V'tzimonech kaddish Hashem says, remember, kaddish is la Hashem, which means it's doesn't belong to you. So it's like usher to you. Igdi amri kever ninva usher. V'simanach kivri oivdi kachavim. Okay. So it's interesting that Kivar Nuna, Rav Hamnuna, this is was called Kar Nuna in Masechtas Kedushin. So it could be a play on words to Kvar Nuna. Okay. Rabbi Akiva ikla Ginzak. So Rabbi Akiva went to this location. Asa Kamei Hahu Nuna. So there was this type of fish that was presented before him. Dahavi Dami lechifusha chafia b'dikula. So he, let's see if there's any Rashi over here. So he took it and he shook it onto a basket. Says Rashi, kisau b'tzal. He covered up with a basket, upirchas, and then he started shaking inside the basket. Vinishir kalifin, and the scales fell off. So chazbe kalfe v'sharya, but he was able to actually see by doing this type of a trick that they actually did have fins and scales was kosher. Ravashi ikla with tam dure, asking Yahud involved a certain fish, the havi dami with sal ufcha, which looked almost like an eel or something like that. Nati lahadi yoima chazda dahavi be simchi. He saw that it had small scales of sharia. Ravashi ikolahu atra. He went to a city. Asa kamei nanva a nuna, type of fish. Dahavi dami with, it was comparable with shaf renuna, which again is apparently a non-kosher fish. So chavia b'mishichli chiyura. So he covered it up with a white basket. Chazabe kalfi v'shari. Again, he was able to figure out and see its scales. Rabba barbachana ikla la'akra de agma. So he went to this particular place. Karivule, and they brought to him sachnasa. Shamulahu gavri. He heard the havi karile ba'ati, that they called it this particular name. Says Rashi, Hushem dag tame. That's a type of a non-kosher fish. Oh, remember the karile ba'ati. Since he calls it that, shmamida dever tame isme. It must be tame. Lo yachol min, and didn't eat. Asafra, the next morning, ayin boy looked into it. Ashrach be dever tame. He found that it was tame. Kari nashe. So he quoted upon himself, that there will not be a stumbling block for the tzaddik, any sin. Okay, weiter. V'hakayred shel chiltus. So he said this type of chiltus, the type of plant. So my time, what's the problem with cutting with this? Yisham demafsaki le b'sikino, because you're cutting it with a knife. Avdi amar nice and tabagam mutter. Now, the fattiness of their knife, but the knife wasn't used for more than 24 hours. So normally we say nice and tabagam. Once it's no longer a ben yoimai, then it's a davar mutter, because nice and tabagam we pass is mutter. However, agav chorfe de chiltisa, because of the sharpness of the plant, machale shemnisa, it will cause like the sweating of the fattiness of the knife. So when you cut something which is a davar charif, it could cause more like heat for the fattiness inside the knife to come out, and therefore because of that, it's usher. Okay, which is question 11. Let's just take a look at question 11 while we're here. My time usher karit shel chiltis avdikayim l'noisen tamagam mutter. So the answer is the agav chorfe, the chiltis, because this plant is so sharp, machashim nisa, it's going to cause the fatness to come out, and that's noisen tam tamagam shvach. Okay. Avde de Rav Levi havikam mazvin chiltisa. So he used to sell this chiltis. Kinach nafshe de Rav Levi, when he died, asking Rav Yochanan Amalei, mahu mizma minei. Can you buy it from his servant? So who? Adu shel chaver hariku chaver. It's an unbelievable word. That the servant of a Talmid Chacham has the same status as a Talmid Chacham. Because you know that the Eved was trained, and he's still going to be respectful of what he was taught. Rav Huna bar Minyaim is zaven techilta. He sold tchelas mi'anshe beisa to beisa to Rav Amram Chasida. Ask what Rav Yosef loy have biyadei. He didn't know if this was allowed. Pagi bechanan chita or melei Yosef anya manolei. B'didi have you of this one's happened the zvini techilta mi'anshe to beisa the Ravana that was like from his wife. They didn't know whether you could buy it from her. It fell into my hand. And therefore, if she sells it, not a problem, because she has the same status. As Rashi, now you need me. I actually have a good answer. So the wife of a chaver is like a chaver himself. Is the same thing. Chaver shemes, when a Talmid Chacham dies, ishtu ubanav v'nei beso harahin b'cheskason ad shichshdu. So we should always assume they have the chazaka like their past husband or father until somehow he's suspect otherwise. So to a chatzar when she sells tchelas, harihin b'cheskasin ad shetipasel. Tanabon. Eishes am haaretz. What if the wife was married to an am haaretz, and then she nises l'chaver, and then she ends up marrying a chaver? V'chein bita shel am haaretz shenises l'chaver. V'chein avda shel am haaretz shenimchor l'chaver. So kulon tzrichen l'kabel dibri chavros. They just have to accept upon themselves this new person who is a chaver, and therefore they will take upon themselves the same status. Of Eishes chaver shenises al ma'aretz, and Eishes chaver who marries an ma'aretz, v'chein bitoy shel chaver shenises al ma'aretz, v'chein avdu shel chaver shenimchol al ma'aretz, einen tzrichen l'kabel de you don't. She doesn't have to be mekal anything. De bari chavros l'chadchila divra meir, because we say that the words. Basically what it is that it stays. There's an assumption that they retain their status. There's the words of Rabbi Meir. So it says Rashi Medchil Kodim Shehi Nemanim B'chol Davar Chavros Shechon of Tahara, etc. Okay. So again, if they were married to a Talmid Chacham, and then all of a sudden it goes to an Am Haaretz, so that's one din. However, the other way around, if she was, let's say, a daughter of a chaver and she marries an am haaretz, so we say no, it doesn't matter. We say they're going to stay to their old traditions. She was very first married to a chacham. She used to tie tefillin. Nises l'moiches. Then afterwards, she married a tax collector. Vaisa kasheres lo kishri moiches. And then she used to tie up the ties of tax collecting. Al yadai. In other words, she had the expertise of being an expert tire. So it doesn't mean necessarily that just because she was making tefillin that she was a trustworthy person. It's possible that again she was just linked now to this new person, and now she's bad. And therefore, if someone was married to a Talmid Chacham, then married to Am Haaretz, so then, according to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, she has to also Srichen L'Kabel Divri Chavros, or Chad Chiyuv. Omarav, Chavius Asur B'Chaysim Echad. One seal is not enough that, because otherwise we're concerned, with regard to four things, we'll see what they are in a second, that it may have been switched by an Akum. However, Chamfag mutter b'chaysim echad, because apparently we're not as concerned. Okay. All right, but again, there's an interesting word about the wife. A good wife does the will of her husband, good or bad. Okay, so fine. So now let's understand this. So first of all, what is chamfag? That's mutter b'chaysim echad. So chalav, basar, yayin, tchelas. So we say when it comes to pardon me. This is, first of all, it's talking about in order, chavas. Chavas is as b'chaysim echad. These are very more expensive things, like milk, meat, wine, and techelas. So therefore, chaysim echad is not enough. As we continue to Lamed Testament Beis, asurin b'chaysim echad. Rashi says the kivan the basav and the cheles. When it comes to meat and the cheles of the tzitzis, the mei mikarim, it's very expensive. Tarch, the guy may trouble himself. Mazayev, and he may engage in forgery, etc. Chiltis, Morius, Pas, and Gvina, these things are matorin b'chaysim echad. And the idea is because they are not as expensive. And therefore, they're not going to trouble themselves to cheat their way around this. Okay. So, Pas, Lamai Nichashla. So, when it says bread, so one seal is enough. So, what are you concerned of? Maybe he's going to switch cold and hot bread. Midiyada, you'll know. He's going to switch wheat and barley bread. You'll know that. Ki hadadi, if they're the same. Like, why is he going to switch it? Like, why? What's his motivation to switch the bread for the same quality bread? He's not gaining anything. So, according to him, why by cheese is a person not matriach? Should say the same thing about milk, right? Why is chalav? I understand basar is expensive, yain's expensive, but milk, right? What's the whole issue over here? So, Omer Rab Kahana apik chalav ayil chatichas dog shein bo siman. You're right. Milk is not something significant, and therefore instead of challah, put in chatichas, pieces of fish which have no siman. Hainu basar. So how do you try? So that's true, but trade gavni basar. Which one's like they're different types of meats, if you will. Ushmol aimer bayis aser b'chaysim echad. Machag is mutar b'chaysim echad. So what is aser? So basar, yain, chelas. So basically it's the same stuff, but it doesn't mention the whole thing about the milk. Asur b'chaysim echad. Murias chiltis and gavina mutar b'chaysim echad. Ushmol chatichas dag shein bo simin hainu basar trade gavni basar lo amrinan. He doesn't hold of that spot. Okay, let's look at question 12. Eilu dal davar mana rav she'asurin b'chaysim echad. So we just said the meat, wine, tcheles, and l'maskanas chatichas dag shein bo simin. Okay, that was question 12, and TA. Chavius aser b'chaysim echad. Chamfag mutter. Mahim chavis, mahin chamfag. That's a hard question. That's a really hard question. That's what we asked. So chatichas dag basar yad chelas, and chamfag is chiltis, murius, pas, and gavina. Okay. All right. Let's see if there's a TB over here. Yeah, chavius aser b'chaysim echad. Same question. All right. Very difficult question, by the way. But that's what they're asking. Okay, so that's TB21. So I'll just put this down here. Okay, they want you to memorize it. Okay. Right. Tanuban. Ein loichin yamach mechag. Says Rashi, shechen vanim shebesuria, the stoners in Syria, chashidi, they're suspect. Because they're not very careful about lifnei iver, other people stumbling. So in Syria, what's yud mem and chet? Lo yayin, right? These are from Jewish store owners. V'lo morius, v'lo chalav, v'lo melech salkundris, v'lo chiltis, v'lo gavina. El min a mumcha. It has to be from a mumcha, someone you trust. In other words, even though it's possible that these are non-kosher items, they're different problems, yain nesach or whatever, they're not makbid on lifnei iver. Therefore, you have to be careful with those people. For kula, im nisarich etzel bal habayis mutter. If let's say you're a guest by bal habayis, it's mutter since they themselves keep kosher, right? So if they're serving food at their table, you know that if they're eating it, that it's going to be kosher, so you could eat it too. Messiah Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Shargul bal habayis lebeso mutter. My time about bal habayis lo shavik katera be'achli sur. He's not going to eat his own also food. The chim shargule memai, the achol mishadule. So basically, you're going to be eating that which he himself is eating. Okay. Umelech salkundris, this particular item which had salt, which the Roman bakers used to eat. Says Rashi, nachtoimin shimuroim, these bakers in Roim. So my melech sal kundris. So I'm Rabbi Yehuda, I'm Shmuel, melech shekoil sal kundri roimi oichlin oisa. It's this type of food in which all the bakers of Rome would eat it, and they used to mix intestines of non-kosher fish in there. It says Rashi, the asur mishum shemarvin ba kirivi dogim tamein. Tanabana, melech sal kundris shchayra asura lavana muteres divra meir. Says it depends on its color. If it's black, it's asur. If it's white, it's mutter. Rabbi Yehuda aimer lavana asur shchayra muteres. So it's actually the other way around. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel said mishum Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. Amr, he said that zubazu asura, black or white's asur. Amr Rabbi Marachana, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, aimer lavana asura. One who said that it's white, it's asur. Kiri dagim lavanim tameim. If you have these innards of non-kosher fish and they're white, muravin ba, they're mixed in, and therefore that's the issue. Is because there was these black non-kosher fish, their innards which were mixed in there. Is because obviously for the reason is zuvazum or ribbon ba, they black and white were mixed in together, non-kosher fish. Amar Rabbi Avoy, Mishum Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, Zakam Echad Haya B'Shchina. He was an older man in my neighborhood. Machlik Paneha B'Shuman Chazir. That he used to smooth out on the salt the fat of a pig. Hari Elu Asurin Lemuti Mai Lechizkim Lemuti Biyadua. As we said, if you know for a fact that there's yain in there, then it's also Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan Lemuti Murius. When it comes to the fish fats, fish brines, Gavinas base unki v'stama k'Rab Meir. The Stam Mishnah is like Rab Meir. Adka.